this. We're all coming in from a different briefing, and so everybody's getting here as quick as they can, getting setups on it. So we'll get started briefly. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's subcommittee hearing to examine Government Accountability Office's recent reporting and their consistent annual reports on high-risk, fragmented, overlapping, and duplicative government programs that negatively impact the nation's fiscal health. Today, we're joined by Comptroller General Gene Dodaro, who will be retiring at the end of this month after 52 years of 52 and a half years of federal service. Gene, I was 5 years old when you started serving the nation. That is a remarkable service. There are very few people in the world who can say that they saved their nation billions of dollars based on their service, but you are one of those. And so from our committee and from myself and from my family, thank you for those decades of federal service that you gave to our nation to be able to help get our fiscal health back in order. Your work at GAO to increase transparency and to reveal fraud and waste and duplicative government functions and operations has been remarkable. So we thank you for that. The mission today is as vital as what we faced years ago. We have $37 trillion in federal debt and rising. Last year, with the help of the annual report from GAO, we saved taxpayers over $67 billion, bringing the total GAO savings during this federal report to $1.45 trillion saved since 2002. In the report that we will outline today, GAO has identified 38 high-risk areas with significant vulnerability to fraud, waste, abuse, and mismanagement. GAO has also found 148 new instances of fragmentation, overlap, and duplication. Every time I talk to Oklahomans, they make it clear they want Washington to waste less and save more. They do not want to pay for fake Obamacare enrollees. They don't want to pay for unused federal office space. They want us to eliminate the red tape and to be able to do the services they expect us to do in the most efficient way possible. Last year in my annual Federal Fumbles book, I reported how fragmented our disaster recovery process in this country has become. When people are going through the worst time in their lives after a bad storm, they don't want to have to parse through 30 different federal agencies to determine what they're eligible for or how to be able to go through benefits. They don't even have a desk to sit at anymore to work on that. They just need help. This is one of many examples of unacceptable government red tape that we need to eliminate. There are some very important questions that need to be asked today about how the government can fix these issues that GAO has identified. I want to thank the Comptroller General for taking time away from his very busy schedule. We do appreciate the opportunity to be able to hear this. I also want to be able to highlight one thing as well. Typically in this conversation on high risk and on government waste and fraud, we would have Senator Joni Ernst that would be seated here as well to be able to go through that. She is currently returning back through Germany, bringing back 2 Iowa National Guardsmen that were killed this past weekend in an attack in Syria. So she will not be at the dais today, but our hearts are with the Iowa folks and with their families, and appreciative of Senator Ernst for her continued work on that. With that, I'd like to recognize Senator Fetterman for his opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. And thank you, Comptroller General, and your team, and for your work for these reports, for your testimony today. This is the last time the Comptroller General will testify before he retires. Only the Senate would like to say thank you for inviting someone in the hearing to give sworn testimony. Gene is a Yinzer, or am I wrong? Do you claim? Absolutely. Yeah. So that's part of Pittsburgh. So what actually was the community?
I was born in Menneson, grew up in Bell Vernon.
Menneson?
Yes.
Wow, Menneson, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right down for me on the Mon. Wow.
Right.
So that's definitely a Yinzer. That's cred, you know. And you attended Lycoming College, correct?
That's correct, yeah, in Williamsport, Pennsylvania.
Yeah. My experience with Lycoming is they used to beat us up in football when I was in college. But regardless, I'm grateful to your service. I want to congratulate you for your retirement. Seriously, congratulations. You have saved taxpayers a lot of money, and for that, I want to thank you, too, publicly. GAO's nonpartisan work and independence is more ever important now, and every game needs an umpire, someone to call balls and strikes, no matter who's in control. I assume you agree.
Absolutely.
We need to make sure that our most critical programs, ones that feed children, help our seniors, protect farmers, and keep our country safe, works better for the American people. Back to you.
Thank you. Gene, I'll ask you about the Pittsburgh Steelers before we actually swear you in at this point. So grateful for your fandom there. I grew up a Steelers fan and a rebellious kid who cheered for Terry Bradshaw back in the day. So y'all, thank you for the time. I'd ask Gene for you'd stand, take the oath, and your team that will actually have the potential to be able to come and ask questions, answer questions also stand as well. Would you raise your right hand? Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give before this subcommittee is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. You may be seated. Let the record reflect all answered in affirmative there. Gene, for the last time in your long career, we are looking forward to receiving your testimony. You're recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Fetterman, members of the subcommittee. I'm very pleased to be able to be here to talk about GAO's work. I want to focus on 2 themes today. One is confronting high risk facing the federal government. These risks, if solved, can save billions of dollars, provide better public service to the country and American people, and really reduce the risk of a crisis coming forward. The hardest part of my job is to get the administration and Congress to act before there's a crisis. The high-risk list is your warning signals. They are flashing yellow or red in some cases. I'll highlight a few today. Second, our federal government's on an unsustainable long-term fiscal path. And we've got some suggestions that need to be addressed in order to deal with that issue. There are fiscal policy issues, but there's a wide range of other things that could be done to bring better federal discipline to the federal government. First, on the risk side, we added FEMA reform as a high-risk area in our update earlier this year. FEMA's stretched way too thin. There's over 600 disasters they're still managing. There are too many disasters. They're more frequent and intense. FEMA is in need of reform. Mr. Chairman, you pointed out 30 different federal agencies. People don't know where to go if they need help. Do they go to the HUD? Do they go to Homeland Security? Do they go to the Transportation Department? This is not a good process. And we need to focus both on the initial recovery as well as the long-term, or initial response, and the long-term recovery afterwards. Secondly, cybersecurity and critical infrastructure protection is not getting the attention necessary, the urgent attention commensurate with the evolving grave threat. I designated cybersecurity as a high-risk area across the entire federal government. In 1997, critical infrastructure in 2003, there have been a lot of changes we've made in the last 10 years, 4,400 recommendations, 600 are still open. I'm concerned that Homeland Security, CISA, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, has reduced the number of people. They provided a lot of assistance to, including election officials at the state and local level last time. I'm concerned they may not be postured to do that with the midterms coming up, as well as deal with critical infrastructures throughout the country. We're under attack every day, and from state and non-state actors. We're very vulnerable. We need the attention on that issue. Thirdly, on risk, the federal workforce. 21 of the 38 areas on the high-risk list are there in part because of skill gaps and shortages in high-risk areas, including at the VA, for example, and other areas. And so a lot of the changes have been introduced recently to reduce the workforce. I certainly believe and endorse additional efficiencies, but it has to be done in a very thoughtful manner. So this is something that I think Congress needs to watch because it could further undermine the capability of the government to deliver for the American people. On the fiscal front, Congress within the next 7 years is going to have to confront Social Security and Medicare Hospital Insurance Trust Fund. Both by 2033 will be depleted. There will only be enough in payroll taxes to pay 73 cents on the dollar in Social Security, 89 cents on Medicare. Improper payments, every year the federal government for the last 7 years spends over $150 billion that goes to the wrong individuals or in improper amounts. The federal government's not collecting, on recent estimates, $600 billion a year in revenue that should be collected. So we got money flying out the door that shouldn't, not enough money coming in based on current tax law and enforcement. We have many other recommendations at GAO that could save tens of billions of additional dollars. Our high-risk program has saved over $811 billion through Congress and administration's actions. Eliminating overlap, duplication, and fragmentation, we started as a result of your predecessor, Senator Coburn. That saved $725 billion through actions taken. But there's much more that could be done. So I'm very pleased to be here today. I thank you for the opportunity to come and talk about GAO's very important work. And while I'm leaving, I leave behind a very strong, dedicated, one of the best workforces in the world, and they'll be here to continue to support the Congress going forward as you deal with these wide range of international and domestic issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm going to defer my questions to the end on that. I would recognize Senator Fetterman if you have questions now.
So I touched on that earlier, and now for me, I think we can all hear, we would agree that the GAO is a very, very vital part of and a mission for our government overall, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And now it's really important, I think we believe, that we can trust and know there's no political motivations based on the reports and the kinds of information that you relay, correct?
Absolutely. We pride ourselves on being nonpartisan, independent, objective, fact-based.
Yeah, and for me, regardless, yes, I'm a Democrat, but I don't care whether it's a Democratic administration or Republican. You know, it's absolutely important that we have an umpire that can make sure what comes from your department, you know, it's whether it's good or bad politically for whatever reason, that we have to trust that must be true. And any kinds of attempts that would degrade that or to influence that or to create effectively an arm of a political party, I think is dangerous, and it undermines, I think, that critical mission. You would agree with that?
Absolutely. I mean, that's why the Comptroller General has a 15-year appointment. It's one of the longest in the government, and it's there to help insulate against political influence and to ensure independence. And so it's critical. to be able to do that. Plus, GAO, the Comptroller General, cannot be removed by the President, only by impeachment by the Congress. That further ensures independence in our auditing of the executive branch agencies.
That's good. So what would you have any parting advice for the person that's next going to fill your job after you retire?
Absolutely. First thing, we need a person in there that can fulfill the nonpartisan role as much as humanly possible, to work with both sides of the aisle to gain the trust and respect of the Congress. We're in the auditing business, but we're also in the relationship business. I try to meet with majority and minority leaders of all the committees. We do work for 90% of the standing committees of the Congress. I try to, talk to them on a consistent basis. I meet with leaders of the executive branch agencies to build relationships. Just because we're independent and in the legislative branch doesn't mean we shouldn't have good constructive engagement with the executive branch agencies. We rely on them to implement our recommendations. Thirdly, I would tell a person coming in, trust the people in the GAO. We have well-developed best practices of our products. We issue over 600 reports a year in a very public arena, and those reports are all meet certain quality standards, and we have just great people, and I'm very pleased about that. So build relationships in the Congress, the agencies, be a good spokesperson, know how to manage a multidisciplinary workforce, and listen to your people.
I have one last question. You've been for 19 years, correct?
As Comptroller General, about 18, yeah.
Okay. So what would you describe your single proudest accomplishments? It's like if you could just say one thing, when you walk away, because this was the top one.
I think stepping up during the global financial crisis. I became acting Comptroller General in March 2008. We helped implement and oversee and provide real-time auditing to help the country at that time. And we're on the precipice of a depression potentially. The $700 billion package that unfroze the credit markets, the GAO provided real-time auditing from day one that law was passed and it reported publicly every 60 days. As a result, we just finished the net cost of that program to stave off the global financial crisis was $31 billion, not 700. It's about only 400 and some was used, but the banks repaid the money. Automakers, I testified when GM, Ford, and Chrysler came to get loans to stave off bankruptcy. It was a very tenuous moment in our country. And so it started GAO providing real-time auditing for Congress when Congress needed to take extraordinary measures. This followed in the Great Recession with the stimulus, most recently the pandemic. We reviewed all $4.6 trillion of assistance, issued over 240 reports, 400 some recommendations. So that, to me, that Congress can rely on GAO when it needs it the most, when we have national emergencies. I'm very proud of that.
I get that. Metaphorically, you effectively were providing the directions and the information. They're trying to land a plane right now in distress, correct? That could just land smooth or it could crash. And now they're able to trust that coming from there. And I think effectively looking back, that was successful. Is that a state?
Yes. It was probably, I call it the most successful but hated program in American history because people didn't like bailing out Wall Street, but we didn't really have an option as a country at that point. As Chairman Bernanke at the Federal Reserve, Hank Paulson at Secretary of Treasury, and then Secretary Geithner that came in, I thought they all did a good job. And we worked in partnership with them. We were independent. Our first report had 10 recommendations. One, that they be more transparent about what the banks were doing with the money that they were given. But we worked together. And as a result, we helped the country get out of a very, very difficult moment.
I think people forget what kind of how dangerous not our economy and the world economy and that. So so critical what you performed and do that during that time. So I thank you for that, and it reminds everybody just how critical your role is. So again, thank you. No more.
Senator Marino.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for being here. I don't want to relitigate the bailouts. I'd say it's a hated program because there wasn't a single solitary person who was held accountable. I think that's what the American people would say. As somebody who came here from outside of politics, nobody went to jail. This cost the taxpayer billions and billions of dollars and zero accountability. So, but let's not relitigate that whole conversation. In terms of waste, fraud, and abuse, I can tell you as somebody who owned a small business, I used to joke with my team that I would love to have the money that big corporations waste, because that would make me fabulously wealthy, just taking their waste. Then I got here, and I just had to add zeros. $2.8 trillion since 2003 in waste, fraud, abuse, and improper payments. When did government stop caring about that? People don't like to pay taxes. We understand that. But when people see their tax dollars treated in this way, where it's just, I don't know if it's that this town is numb to this, but in your mind, just ask you a direct question.
Right.
What is a tolerable amount of waste, fraud, and abuse and improper payments?
I think as close to zero as you can get. It's not feasible to get there, but we're way beyond what's a reasonable level of waste, fraud, and abuse in the federal government. We did our first estimate ever of fraud from 2018 to 2022. On an annual basis, we estimated between $233 billion or to $521 billion annually to fraud. Now, we're doing an estimate now on the revenue side. I expect it to be maybe not that high, but to be significant. The federal government right now is very vulnerable to fraud from organized crime, both domestically and internationally. I mean, during the pandemic, some people have said we trained a whole new generation of fraudsters because we had so much money available during that period of time. We helped Congress put in a Fraud Prevention Act, but the agencies haven't implemented it effectively. And that's one area that I think Congress needs to provide more rigorous oversight on. One of our recommendations is to provide more reporting every year to be visible as to what the agencies are doing to measure fraud in some of the high-risk programs like Medicare, Medicaid, for example. Unemployment insurance is another one. And so we have open recommendations to OMB and Treasury to come up with those more precise estimates. And if you measure it and report, you'll get the reaction that you talk about. We found improper payments through the first financial audits of the federal government. And we've worked with Congress to have agencies
So if I
report.
can just pause there.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
So I just go back to the only world I know, which is my world.
Right.
And we started as a small business and grew it into a decently sized business, but never would we ever tolerate a scenario where we may have paid a vendor twice, we may have paid the wrong amount in payroll once. Right. We always got the money back. By the way, if that meant that I got in my car, drove to that business, and sat there until they wrote me a check, that's what I would do. What are we doing about getting that money back? So if we send $100, which imagine that from the federal perspective, and it was not intended for that company or individual, what are we doing about getting that money back? And what do we need to do in terms of raising the penalties to the point, not quite the death penalty, but maybe a couple clicks below that for not doing that? Like what are the ramifications of getting improper payments from the federal government?
Yeah. First, the incentives aren't aligned properly.
But I'm saying, well, what do we do?
Yeah.
In other words, if we know we sent XYZ Corp money.
Right. The agencies, we have many recommendations to go collect that money.
And do they do it?
In some cases they do, some they don't get it all back. I mean, and for example, in the economic...
How do you give, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, sure.
How do we give agencies more money here in Congress if the agencies don't have a airtight process to get that money back? That doesn't even make, honestly, that doesn't process in my brain, where we allocate appropriate money to agencies and the agencies don't have an airtight, zero leakage process to get money back. I don't understand how that, either the penalties aren't so incredibly high or the agencies aren't doing it. It goes back to my beginning of my comments.
Right.
Which is the reason people hated the bailouts is because nobody's held accountable. How do we not have that being top priority at all these agencies?
Yeah, most of the agencies feel they get in trouble for not paying somebody, as opposed to paying somebody
How
that
do we
they don't
flip
know.
that?
We need to flip it. We need to have more oversight
what
by
can
the
we do?
Congress.
What can we do to flip
Congress needs to have the agencies come up. I come up all the time and testify on improper payments. Agencies are rarely brought up before Congress and so what are you doing about it? And what can we do to build in? Some of these programs, too, don't go through annual appropriations. They're on mandatory spending on Medicare. If somebody meets the requirement, they get paid. Yeah, you know, and so they need more oversight by the Congress to hold people accountable. There's clear information that's available, but unless Congress holds people accountable and there's more focus on the executive branch and having transparency about these improper payments, we're trying to provide more transparency about it. But you got to set requirements on the agencies, and you got to follow up. You know, most of the time they hear from Congress is because one of your constituents didn't get paid, as opposed to people being overpaid. And I think they need to hear that.
Is there any opportunity for partnerships with private companies that can use AI, that can use their own programs to go out and give them an incentive to go out and do what the agencies aren't willing to do?
Yeah, I think there's opportunities for better technology. But also, one thing you should do is, it took me almost 10 years to convince Congress to have the death master file from Social Security Administration given to the Fiscal Service of Treasury to stop paying dead people. You know, during the pandemic, we paid $1.4 billion in economic incentive payments to deceased individuals.
But again, how did we not get that money back?
Well,
Somebody cashed those checks.
They got about half of it back, and they didn't get the rest. But I'm saying Congress needs to make this. This is on a pilot program right now. It's already saved $100 million a year. Congress needs to make that permanent. That's one of our recommendations.
I think, Mr. Chairman, what we could do is start a Fortune 10 company that would only collect the money the government wastes. And it's sad that that's actually would probably be an incredibly profitable enterprise, but we have to do more, and we cannot normalize this.
Nope, I agree. Senator Hassan.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair and Ranking Member Fetterman. And I have a series of questions. I did want to just offer to Senator Marino, there is real bipartisan interest in dealing and tackling with waste, fraud, and abuse. I will say one of the most important things we do in the government is have independent, nonpartisan inspectors general. The HHS Inspector General in 2023 or 2024, I think, recovered $400 million from a fraudulent medical equipment scam. That person was fired early in this administration. So I think there are a number of things we ought to be working together on and going after, especially the big ticket items here, which often is corporate fraud waged against the government. And I'd look forward to working on that with you. Comptroller General Dodaro, as this will be your final appearance before this committee, I want to begin by thanking you for your decades of service and for GAO's role as Congress's independent, nonpartisan watchdog. Just in your testimony today, you've reflected the importance of professional, nonpartisan civil servants and public servants, and we are really grateful to you and your entire team. Under your leadership, GAO has performed independent, fact-based oversight of the executive branch. That role is especially critical right now as Congress grapples with a number of challenging issues, such as impoundment and access to agency information. What advice do you have for Congress as we work to preserve and strengthen GAO's ability to carry out its critical role, and particularly when it comes to maintaining access to information and protecting GAO's independence?
Yeah. First, I would say Congress's support in us getting access to the information we need to do our work is absolutely critical. And take impoundments, for example. We worked with Congress a few years ago to create a statutory requirement for OMB to list the apportionments that they were making to the individual agencies to be visible about, okay, how much is appropriated, how much has been apportioned. That will tell you that it's in play to be obligated and spent. OMB took down that website. And despite Congress writing bipartisan requests, OMB did not put that website back up until there was a court case and the court ordered them to do it.
Yeah.
It's still not fully disclosing everything that we think it needs to do. OMB has not been cooperating with us and giving us information to deal with impoundments. We're getting a lot of our information from digging through court cases and sworn testimony. So we need more support for access. And the way to do it, the only effective tool Congress has, in my opinion, has worked over decades, is the appropriation process to fence money, to condition money on condition of providing GAO the access that it needs.
Yeah. Well, the access is really important. It's key to your independence, obviously. And that was going to be the whole issue of impoundment and information from OMB was going to be my next question. Because for those who don't know, according to recent reporting, you stated, as you just did now, that GAO has had difficulty getting information from OMB, and as a result has to rely on evidence from lawsuits filed against the current administration by other parties. But here's the thing, the D.C. Court of Appeals ruled in August that grantees lacked the ability to sue the administration over impoundment, adding that instead the Comptroller General may bring suit as authorized under the Impoundment Control Act. That puts you guys in a really tough position because OMB isn't providing your office with the information it needs, so you have to rely on evidence from lawsuits, but you're the ones who are now told you're the only ones who can sue. So now really you're being told by the court the only way you can get the information that we all need to function is to sue OMB. And that strikes me as ridiculous. So what other things, you've talked about the appropriations process. Are there statutory changes we could make so that others could sue OMB if they're not getting the grants that have been appropriated? Or what other things could we do in addition to the appropriations?
Yeah. I think effective oversight hearings are really important to be able to have people explain why they're not giving us the information that they need. Writing letters, providing support. But the only thing I've found that's effective is the money.
Yeah.
I mean, the money. If you don't, condition the money on this thing, they're not going to take it seriously.
Well,
but oversight is important, and I wouldn't underestimate the transparency of making this publicly known.
Right.
That people are not doing it. But on the laws, see, we don't read the law the same way as the court interpreted it. But that's a difference.
Right. Which you still are caught up in a litigation process as opposed to a governing process.
Litigation is a tool. I consider it last resort. It's not very efficient or effective.
Yeah.
And it does not provide us put us in a position to provide timely assistance to the Congress. Congress wants timely assistance.
Right. So I would suggest that might be something we all look at. Who has the authority if OMB is stonewalling to go to court, and whether that would, and it shouldn't, I think, just be GAO. I want to get to one other issue. Congress and the administration need to do more to crack down on criminals who scam Americans out of their hard-earned money and who fraudulently steal taxpayer dollars from the federal government. Globally, the scam industry is now costing the global economy more than the illicit drug trade. It's over $1 trillion a year now. So GAO has found that federal efforts to combat scams and fraud are fragmented, with multiple agencies pursuing their own initiatives, but no clear government-wide approach. In your duplication reports, GAO has previously pointed to performance management tools such as the government-wide priority goals as mechanisms to promote cross-agency collaboration. How can Congress best ensure that the federal government treats scams as an urgent cross-cutting challenge rather than multiple disconnected efforts?
Yeah, we issued a more recent report in April this year recommending that the FBI lead a coordinated government-wide effort to deal with scams. They agreed. They've started doing it. They put a working group together in October. They're going to identify some gaps in the law that need corrected to give them more strength. You could also use the cross-cutting agency priority goals to hold them accountable. But the process is underway. I'm very pleased on how they've responded. And Congress could support that, work with them, try to encourage them to provide ideas to Congress on statutory changes that would help close loopholes and give them stronger tools.
I appreciate that, and with my colleagues' indulgence for just one more second, there's one, I'm forgetting which country it is, but they have a centralized way for people to report scams, and because it's centralized, they're able to trace the scams sometimes within a few hours and shut them down. So there's real work we could do on that, I think, too, especially when it comes to scamming government. Thanks.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you again for the work and for your whole team. I'm going to go through several different specific areas. I want to start with disaster relief. It may be surprising to some of the folks here that Oklahoma occasionally has a random storm that comes through, a wildfire that comes across our state. So I want to get a chance to talk about this. GAO has identified multiple areas of overlap and of duplication. You also produce what I affectionately call the spaghetti map of the 30 different agencies that are all involved in a typical disaster. So if I'm an Oklahoman that lives in a small town and was just hit by a major tornado and it took out City Hall as well as taking out my house and my business, I'm supposed to figure out what agency to get to and hope they come knock on my door if they can find me to be able to tell me how to apply for assistance. I also find that the standards for assistance are different in each different agencies. The timelines for decision are different for each different agency. The timeline that it's open even to apply is different for each entity on this. So this is a hot mess as we deal with, and we just use the term FEMA on it, but this is far beyond just what's happening in DHS and in FEMA. This goes to all disaster recovery. So your recommendations are important to us. How do we start to be able to handle this? Because this quickly becomes a partisan conversation when it's really about individuals that have experienced disaster, how to get through the process. So let's talk about how can we actually better manage this process for an individual that's just gone through a major disaster?
Yeah, and it definitely needs government-wide reform. You know, we use FEMA as a shorthand for disaster assistance, so we are clearly recommending what you suggest. Chris has been following this. He's been on the ground in a lot of disasters for a while. I'll ask him to.
For each person that comes up, can you just identify your name for the record as well?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. Thank you. My name's Chris Curry, GAO. So usually with our graphics, we try to make them very understandable to the public. We purposefully made this one difficult to understand so people would see how challenging this area is and impossible to navigate. And as you said, this is just at the federal level. If you're a local government official, you also have to navigate state rules and requirements. Right. So we actually, 2022, we recommended that Congress establish a commission because this cuts across so many committees of jurisdiction and so many agencies, and we thought this needed to be addressed. This is 2 years before the President's FEMA Council this year. So one of the challenges in reform in this area is it cuts across agencies and committees, which makes it very difficult. And all of these programs were set up with very good intentions, but it's just one of these situations where over the years it has built into a morass of red tape and bureaucracy. It is not customer-centric, it is government-centric, and that's the main problem.
So how do you fix that at this point? So you're still, we have a FEMA process now where they're actually, the executive branch has actually said, okay, let's take a look at all this. They're making their initial recommendations. Do you still recommend a commission to be able to come on top of the previous commission?
I think we'll have to see what the results of the FEMA Council are. My concern about the FEMA Council.
Go ahead.
My concern with the FEMA Council is that it was just focused on FEMA, and so it's not looking at the other agencies. So we'll have to see. It could address some of the issues with FEMA specifically, but if it doesn't address the longer-term recovery issues that are the topic of this graphic, then a larger effort like that will still be needed.
So central for me is one application that is online, that you fill it out, give your situation, and that then it informs you of everything that you're eligible for, all the deadlines and details. To me, that's the first step to being more customer focused, as you mentioned, that rather than committee and federal focused on it, to make sure I don't have to know the secret code and the right place to be able to go. I just experienced a disaster. I can fill this out, and I'm told what I'm eligible for rather than me having to be able to guess it. Would you recommend that as well?
Absolutely. That's one of the options we suggested needs to be looked at, one single application or portal. that's designed around the grantee or the customer, not around the different government requirements.
What kind of fraud do we deal with, or improper payments do we deal with around disaster recovery?
It varies across programs. Over the years, we've seen FEMA's made a number of progress in this area. Like Katrina, fraud was upwards of 22%, as we all remember. Hurricane Sandy around 2012, it got better at around 6%. Since that time, it's continued to get better, but there's still fraud and abuse in these programs, particularly during COVID. There was fraud in the FEMA Funeral Assistance Program and some of the FEMA Unemployment Assistance Programs.
Okay, we'll follow up with that to get specific details. Thanks for all the ongoing work on this. I want to shift to the improper payments on the healthcare side. Gene, you had mentioned this in your testimony, the billions of dollars that are lost in improper payments. When I say improper payments to some folks here, they immediately say, well, improper payments doesn't necessarily mean it's fraud. What I get pushback on is, well, improper payments are we just don't know. So when you say improper payments, what do you mean by that?
Improper payments, the statutory definition is money that should not have been paid or was paid in the wrong amount. Right. It can include payments to ineligible people. It can include payments for services that weren't provided. It's a broader definition than fraud. Fraud is a subset of that. But every fraud, by definition, is an improper payment, but not every improper payment's fraud. Now, what the agencies would start telling you when you're in there, well, it's insufficient documentation. We
That's
can't
what I hear
tell.
most often.
And I'm like, say, I call foul on that. Okay, if you're IRS and you get audited by IRS, if you don't have documentation, the government will take your money.
Yep.
All right. Why should we be paying money to people if we don't have proper documentation that it's a legitimate payment? So the agencies aren't being held accountable for that issue. They're using it as a smokescreen to say there's nothing to see here. We're just making, some errors, and it's a paperwork issue.
It is an issue, as Senator Moreno was mentioning earlier, that we've got to be able to hold more people to account to say there is an expectation that we don't have improper payments that are going out the door. It's been my same issue with a lot of our contractors, that we very seldom suspend or debar contractors, and the same bad contractors do it over and over and over again, and they just get waved on it. On the healthcare side of things, because I want to be able to have some of your specialists to be able to talk through this, specifically on the Medicare, Medicaid side, and some of the other federal programs, whether it be Indian Health Services or whether it be VA, whatever it may be. What are the areas that we need to pay attention to make sure we're getting good health care options to people, but we're not actually wasting taxpayer dollars at the same time?
Yeah.
Sure. I'm Jessica Farb. I'm the Managing Director of Healthcare at GAO. So I think there's been several areas that we've pointed out over the years, especially with regard to improper payments and Medicare Advantage, making sure that CMS does everything it can to identify improving their timeliness for their risk adjustment validation audits. But this is where diagnosis codes are used to pay the providers of insurance through Medicare Advantage, and making sure that
This is the upcoding we hear about.
the upcoding you hear about a lot.
Can you describe that in greater detail so people can hear?
Sure. So when a patient gets a service, there's a diagnosis code associated with that service. In Medicare Advantage, the plans are incentivized to ensure that they collect as many diagnosis codes as possible that might be relevant to that patient's case, because they are paid based on the diagnosis codes. We use risk adjustment to pay them, and the risk adjustment takes into account the relative sickness of the patient. And so Medicare Advantage plans for many years have gone out and collected the codes. They use home health aides to go and help them make sure that they've collected all the diagnoses of the beneficiaries enrolled in their plans. That doesn't obviously happen on the fee-for-service side. But in Medicare Advantage, they are incentivized to do that. So we want to make sure that they're doing more to ensure that those are more timely. They have taken some steps this past year during this administration to do more of these.
I'm sorry, who's the they there?
CMS, the administrator and deputy administrator of CMS have been working on this and talking to us about it. We also want them to look at the diagnostic coding adjustment. There's an adjustment made to sort of account for the differences that I was talking about between fee-for-service and Medicare Advantage beneficiaries. they take the maximum, they don't take the maximum adjustment that they could be taking to sort of differentiate between fee-for-service payment and Medicare Advantage because of these incentives. So that's another area where we think they could be doing more. In terms of Medicaid, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act did do several things to address some of our recommendations there, including taking a look at redeterminations of eligibility, doing that more frequently, as well as looking at the budget neutrality of demonstrations and ensuring that those are really truly cost savings in the demonstrations. That's how they're designed. So all of this is to ensure that the programs, are running efficiently so that they can serve more beneficiaries, so that the people that really need that care can get it and get it in a timely, effective, efficient manner. I could go on, but I'm not going to because I'm already taking up lots of your time.
I get it. I want to ask one more follow-up question.
Sure.
I'm going to Senator Marino on this, and that's on the healthcare. And I want to go to some of the testing that GAO did on the Affordable Care Act. And they did some quick evaluation to be able to say, can you get into the system and actually sign up for this and not be a person on it? My understanding is there were 24 different individuals that were fraudulent, individuals that were created to be able to test the system. The results were pretty stark on this. Yeah. So I want to be able to ask a little bit more about their report and dig in on it.
So good morning, Senator Marino, Chairman Langford. My name is Seto Bagdoyan. I'm a director at GAO, and I'm leading the work with the testing presently. So the actual number is 20 scenarios. We started with 4 in late 2024. We rolled those over, and we added 16 more to our total. This is based on a comprehensive investigative plan. It is designed specifically to test controls, not project the extent of fraud. So I want to be very specific about that. We are focusing on the federal marketplace. And those 20 scenarios involve 10 applications through healthcare.gov and 10 through brokers, which we selected through the website itself and also through random research on Google. 14 of those are single individuals, and 14 of them are, they are all single. 14 of them are at no cost to the enrollee, and 6 of them do pay a modest premium. So we have been successful in 19 of 20 attempts. One attempt was later flagged by CMS in June of this year, so that scenario is no longer active. But we do have 18 of them that cost the government over $10,000 a month in premiums. We will continue to roll them over and monitor what happens from CMS.
So they're still active even at this moment?
They are, as we speak, 18 of the 20 are active.
Okay. So my question to you on this is this false Social Security numbers? Is this multiple Social Security numbers? Is this just entering Mickey Mouse and a fake address in Orlando? And, well, I guess that would be Mickey's actual address, but yeah.
Well, it would be, yes.
Right. Yeah, he vacations in California occasionally. Right. So is this a fake name and fake address?
Everything is fake, sir. All the information, driver's license, the Social Security number, pay stubs, birth certificates, anything and everything that the marketplace has asked us to submit is fake.
My understanding is there's also, you've discovered some folks that are in, or some Social Security numbers that are in there multiple times.
That's right. Yes.
So what are you finding in that where there's, this is not your test of 20 different folks?
That is actual data. That is actual data.
What are you finding with the same Social Security number being used over and over and over again?
Yeah, I will highlight the most egregious one we have to date, which is 127 policies attached to a single number. That's costing the government about $600,000 a year in subsidies. Wow. And it's a mix of full year and part year policies. And the critical point is the 33 full-year policies are spread across 13 different states, and they involve a mix of genders. So that is a red flag that something isn't quite right here.
You would think that you would notice that the same Social Security number has multiple genders and lives in multiple states.
Yes, and when we press CMS on that, Mr. Chairman, their response is we really are not going to do anything because we don't want to kick off the wrong person out of the 127 policies.
Well, that's a problem. And so we'll get a chance to be able to follow up on that as well. So Senator Moreno.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think most Americans are probably not listening to this hearing because they would probably lose their minds. But here's the thing. Why wouldn't we automatically just say, if a Social Security number is in the system twice, you blow out the Social Security number? Make the person who's the legitimate person have to go out and prove that they are who they are. And yes, there's going to be friction for that individual, but there has to be repercussions for the other penalties and fines for the people who attempted that. That just seems like common sense. It seems like, and even in the 1980s, we'd have computer technology that would allow us to do that efficiently, let alone today. Like the fact that you just said earlier, your gentleman earlier said the last name, too many words, too many letters, can't pronounce it, but that you said that the agency knows it and doesn't do anything about it, that's outrageous. That to me is, how is that even remotely possible to have somebody in our government saying, yeah, I know there's fraud, but.
I agree with you. We're continuing this work. We'll make recommendations to deal with this issue. But this was a problem during the pandemic. We allowed people to self-certify. I mean, there were no checks on them, including Social Security numbers or not. There's this myth that
when you say we, who is the we that allowed that to happen?
Congress and
They should all
the
be fired.
agencies. Or at least relocated to California. No, I don't know. I mean, but there's this myth during emergencies, all right, and even during normal programs, you got to get the money out fast, all right.
Let me just interject you there.
Sure.
Those are rich country conversations.
Yes, they are.
I think if this country didn't have the wealth and power that it had, there's no other country that could survive with these kinds of policies. It's outrageous that we allow it to happen.
I agree with you. I've been railing against this for decades. So there are 18 programs right now. The improper payment rate's over 10%. There's no business that would operate that way.
By the way, there's no business that would do it at 0.1%.
Yeah, right.
Let alone 10, you don't even have the margin. You don't have 10% EBITDA companies, so 0.1% is too much. Is there a scorecard that is public around what agencies are doing to fight fraud and how effective they are, like a scorecard that's not 600 pages, by the way,
right?
That is very simple, that says, hey, the agency X does this, agency Y does it better. Like I'm thinking in my world, like a sales ranking report, which, by the way, people hate when they're at the bottom.
Right.
So is there a ranking report like that we could use that's simple and available?
Not yet, but one of our recommendations is more public reporting about what they're doing is based on fraud.
For us. Here's where I'm going with that. If you're at the mean, then your appropriations are at the mean. If you're above, you get extra appropriations. If you're below, it's percentage-wise, your appropriations just gets cut by that amount. We have to take this with great seriousness. So let me ask you a couple of questions. The scam industry, how is it? In the interest of time, let me just give you the conclusion. Yeah. It's obvious that a lot of these scams come from social media, correct?
As far as
not the guy knocking on the door asking you to buy something on a product. It's social media,
right? It's social media or telecommunications, right? Somehow.
So why wouldn't we have legislation that would hold the social media companies responsible for 100% of the fraud committed as a result of a paid ad on their platform?
Offhand, I don't know why you shouldn't hold people some accountable.
Right? I mean, if you're a scammer and you pay a social media company to advertise a scam, that scam is perpetrated on American people or our government, why wouldn't that social media company be 100% responsible? I'd say number one. That's number two is fining corporations is absolutely the most ineffective thing you can do. You got to pierce the corporate veil, and we have to put these executives in jail. If they're not personally held accountable, why would they change behavior? The person earlier was talking about Medicare Advantage. These companies are very good at record keeping. They have a lot of meetings, have a lot of discussions. They're clearly providing directives to their people not only to commit this fraud, but how to commit the fraud. Why aren't we putting those executives under the microscope in jail. This is what makes working Americans completely upset with our government, is that when they do something wrong, if that working class staff does something wrong, they're held accountable. But these wealthy executives, they get away with everything. And finding a company $5, $6, $7, $8, $10 million doesn't even touch that person. They'll get fired, they'll go work somewhere else. So I'd urge my colleagues to look at doing that. How important is it to confirm a nominee for CISA, the agency, given the amount of attacks that we're getting?
I think it's essential. It's very, very important. It's very important. I mean, I think, we've spent a lot of time trying to encourage the government to do more, and CISA was doing a better job. We have a lot of open recommendations still for them to do it, but I'm concerned that we're taking our foot off the gas at CISA, and I think we'll live to regret it.
Mr. Chairman, I think we should look at how we can have some more urgency about getting somebody to helm CISA as soon as humanly possible. Is it accurate that half the staff has already left?
That's from what I understand. About a third.
Yeah, that's obviously untenable, given that the amount of attacks are escalating. The last question, and then I will depart, is how much money, well, actually two questions. How much fraud do you think there is in what we created, well, not we, what they created during COVID with these $0 premiums for the bonus subsidies in Obamacare?
I don't have an estimate.
But it's a decent amount of fraud that was created, because obviously if you sign me up for a health care plan and I'm paying zero, I probably won't complain because I don't even know it exists. But if you ask me even to pay a small dollar amount, I'm probably not likely to pay any monthly premium if I don't need it. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I agree. But there also there was a hold harmless provision on allowing providers to enroll without a lot of checks. And during that whole period, that there were policies in place that they still need to unravel to make sure you have legitimate providers in the system in the first place.
Can you get us that as soon as humanly possible?
Yeah,
because
sure.
I'd like to see that directly.
Yeah, we have that available.
Could you send that to my office? I want to see exactly what we're talking about there.
Sure.
We should not tolerate any, like you said it earlier, my first line of questioning, that the right number is zero, and we're decently far away from zero. Last question is, how much money do you think was intended for American citizens that ended up in the hands of illegal aliens over the last 4 years?
I don't have any idea about that.
More than $1 billion?
I don't know.
Would be a lot. It'd be a lot of money.
It could.
How do we not know?
Yeah, I just don't know.
But why wouldn't there be an obvious citizenship test on welfare programs that are intended for U.S. citizens? Why wouldn't we have that low threshold that says, hey, before you get any social welfare program, you must be a U.S. citizen? That's the law. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle, when they're in front of the cameras, love to say it's already the law of the land. But why aren't we systematic? These are not hard things to do. There's APIs that are very simple. It's done all the time with validating tech companies that says you must be a U.S. citizen in order to get this, and it's qualifying. Why wouldn't we just put that in place and make certain that, again, zero money that is intended for U.S. citizens end up in the hands of illegals?
Yeah. Well, I think all the proper controls need to be put in place. I don't disagree. That's what we've been saying all along. But that doesn't mean that they have the policy and it's being implemented effectively. That's where we find a lot of problems. A lot of times on paper, they'll have that check's supposed to be there. That doesn't mean they're rigorously following and actually doing the check. In that case, that's where we find the weakness, is in the execution, not necessarily in what the policy is on paper or in what's in law or in regulation. It's the execution.
Well, clearly, Mr. Chairman, we have a lot of work to do.
We do, to say the least on this. Gene, you've been very helpful in moving through the Taxpayers' Right to Know bill and giving good counsel on that bill. It is now passed law. The Biden administration started that process with OMB. The Trump administration is also working on full implementation of that. What would you say from GAO's perspective on the status of implementation of that bill, which is all about transparency, that the American people can see how money is being spent, where it's going, how many employees we have in different areas, how programs are being evaluated, so we can see duplication. In the past, if I want to know if there's duplication in programs, I would come to you, your team would do a multi-month study on it, when quite frankly, that's something I should be able to call up immediately online to be able to tell that's what this is all about, to be able to make sure we're getting faster access to duplication and effectiveness of programs. What's the status of implementation right now?
The status is some good progress has been made. We now have, over 2,000 programs listed in there. The program inventory is not yet complete, and all the information that's supposed to be in there, required by the Taxpayer Right to Know Act, is not in there yet. We're working on a report right now. We're going to be providing it early next year, as we've had status reports all along. Even though the law didn't require our first report to be the 27th, we've been, as you know, working diligently all along. I'm disappointed OMB's not cooperating as much as we had in the past. We used to have, meetings with them. That's not happening. I think it's unfortunate because they could benefit from a continued dialogue with us, as I think our involvement's been instrumental in getting to the progress that's been achieved. I'm hoping that would change in the future going forward. We encourage you to encourage them to do that.
Yeah, it is helpful for the American taxpayer. It's helpful for identifying duplication. I've heard over and over again from agency folks that when I would ask them about a program they're doing and saying, are you aware there's another agency doing almost the same program? I've heard over and over, no, we didn't even know they were doing it.
Right.
Because we've become so big and so bloated, even people within the agencies can't see what the other agencies are doing.
Yeah,
We got to be able to solve this duplication issue.
Yeah, and actually, and a lot of what's missing is in defense. And defense is by itself a lot of overlap and duplication. So I think that it's essential we move forward, and we're GAO's prepared to do our work to help advance it as quickly as possible.
Great. You and I have spoken several years on the census. Every 10 years, the census comes up. It's required by the United States Constitution for us to actually do an enumeration of every single person in the United States. We have this multi-billion-dollar entity that stands up to be able to count heads. At the same time, down the street, the Treasury actually interacts with almost every single American every single year. It took us a decade to get the death master file out to other entities so we could track not paying dead people that Social Security knew that they were gone, other agencies didn't. How do we actually get a cooperation between Census and IRS that we're not having to stand up and say, we need to find some way to communicate with every American when the IRS literally does it every year, and then Census is only counting the people that IRS has not connected with that year, that didn't have a tax obligation, whatever it may be on that. How do we actually break through that veil?
Yeah, I think we've seen some level of cooperation begin between IRS and Census. I can provide that information for the record. I think as Census has moved more toward trying to use administrative records to augment and to do the counting that way, which they've made some good headway in the last census, that will create them to go more toward the IRS system. Now, there's obvious some legal parameters. You and I have talked about this in the past about sharing of information between the two agencies, have different statutes that don't allow them to share for certain purposes. That should have to be dealt with.
That's one we've got to be able to fix statutorily, so we're not spending $10 billion on something that we could pass a statute and be able to solve.
Yeah, so having them suggest statutory changes to allow additional sharing would be helpful in that regard. And then they have to have some way to convert households into individuals, and you got to deal with the timing issue, which we've talked about before, because the timing is a little different, and the tax season's always behind, the actual day when they have to count. So there's a timing difference, there's a legal difference, but I think the basic underlying concept of them doing more is sound, but you have to deal with these issues in order to continue it.
I think it's achievable. I think it's a territorial issue where Commerce says, this is our program. This is what we do. We do this. Treasury does that. And so they don't want to share the information. They don't want to try to achieve it because they've got a lot of employees and a lot of structure built around their unique, exquisite system of being able to do it when it's already happening and we could save literally $10 billion.
I think you're right. And the one thing I would say about the sharing of data has always been a problem. But I think this administration is more open to it than I've seen prior administrations being. So I think now's the time to tackle it.
I hope that so. Sharing the data is frustrating, but I would tell you one of the questions that comes to me very often from Oklahomans would be a small business owner that gets survey information saying, I need this information from the Department of Labor, and they contact me and say, I just gave another entity almost identical this same information 3 months ago.
Right.
Why am I getting this? Do you guys not talk to each other at all? And so there is a frustration among the American people to say they're getting out there. If you want to really get somebody's blood pressure going, when the American Community Survey hits them and they pull it out and look at that and say, is this real? This says under penalty of law, I've got to turn this in. And it's an American that gets a survey in the mail from Commerce that says, tell me how many toilets you have in your house. Tell me what time you leave for work. Tell me how far you drive to work. I'm like, stop. Who's asking this and where's this information going to go? And why is this being required of me to be able to ask? It's a very, very frustrating piece. A lot of the data that they're pulling is data that's already out there that other commercial entities already have, but yet we've got this whole entity stood up to try to provide a federal side of that when that data is already publicly available on that. Plus the fact of, quite frankly, asking people what time they leave for work and saying, I'm from the federal government, you can trust me, tell me what time the house is going to be empty, is probably not something most people in America are going to want to just send off that in the mail as well. So I'm not asking you to answer that.
Yeah.
I'm saying that's a big issue that we still got to be resolved.
Yeah, I've been concerned about modernizing our statistical system writ large. So I convened a group of experts, government, private sector. We issued a report. I'll make that available to the committee. But one of the big issues was lack of coordination. Right. And so I think more needs to be done in that area, take advantage of technology to have more sharing of information, to make available commercial sources that years ago when we developed these systems in the federal government, there weren't commercially available systems. And so I think we've said the same thing with defense about commercial satellites. You could use more commercial satellites than building your own satellites. And so the same thing's true in the statistical area as well. So we'd be happy, Joe, to do more work on that subject.
Data is available. I'm going to drill down on just a couple more issues because I don't want you to get off easy in the conversation today. We'll be able to end well. I want to talk about federal real property, which has been an issue for us for a long time. You and I have spoken about this often on how do we get better at actually using the space that we have efficiently. This increased dramatically after the pandemic, and telework really became a thing at this point where we have lots of buildings that are half empty or more scattered around the country. We're still working on getting an actual inventory of every address that the federal taxpayer pays for. And then we have the whole issue of disposal of properties that are underutilized or unutilized on how do we actually manage that. So I know there's several things that are in that. Glad that you've joined us at the table on that. Identify yourself. Let's get a chance to be able to talk a little bit about, number one, do we know how many addresses the federal taxpayer owns? Number two, what is getting better on the disposal process of underutilized and unutilized? And number three on that is, do we know how many properties are half empty on a typical day, and what could be done better to combine together?
Thanks for that. I'm Heather Kraus. I'm the Managing Director of GAO's Physical Infrastructure Team. I'll start with the last one first when you're asking about sort of the utilization and what do we know about utilization. You had the Use It Act that was passed and really provides an opportunity, if effectively implemented, to better understand what is utilization of the property. So that reporting should be beginning here at the beginning of next year. We should start to get data that will be important for us, for agencies to use and partner with GSA to understand, what kind of property do agencies need to meet their mission and what's best for the agency as well as what's best for the federal government. I think you were also asking a little bit about disposals and the process there. We've looked at the FASTA process, which, is looking at ways to expedite, the disposals. We saw some challenges in the first couple rounds of that process in terms of, but we're starting to see some progress. They have a list out now. I think, what we found when we looked at the first couple of rounds is that there's some lessons learned. I think there's some efforts that have been taken to kind of compile some of that, but what we're looking for is really across the different entities that are involved. What do we know of the lessons, and how do we not only apply that to more effectively disposing of properties when it comes to through the FASTA process, but the disposal process overall?
Heather, kind of drill down on that a little bit more. Is the challenge identifying properties to go on that list, or is the challenge actually the disposal process, selling it off?
I think we have some work looking at GSA's both sales process as well, and look forward to sharing that information with you. I think there is a list of disposals that is out there, and those are going to be properties that are underutilized as well as have high levels of deferred maintenance. There is a list that you can start to work with there. And
does that list include Corps of Engineers properties?
I don't have the names of them. I'm happy to follow up and get you the list, yeah.
That's been one of my frustrations for a long time. The Corps of Engineers has a tremendous amount of properties that are basically boat ramps and access to city parks and all kinds of things that are out there that are not maintained anymore, but trying to get it off of their inventory list and to get into a local county, city, or state ownership to be able to transfer that, to be able to make sure that Corps of Engineers is focused on the key aspects that we desperately need the Corps to do and not focused on a boat ramp, trying to get into a property on that.
We can take a look at that. That'd be good.
That'd be helpful.
Yeah, the Corps of Engineers' headquarters is in the GAO building, so it'd be easy to audit them.
We'll walk downstairs and ask them
We
about
will
it.
do
Yeah.
that. We will do that.
Okay. Okay. Anything else?
No, I think, again, you're seeing a lot of momentum when it comes to looking at underutilized space. And I think what needs to happen is action now, following through and disposing and really more effectively using the property and better understanding the utilization, which we're going to have data soon to look at that.
Yeah, I think the other issue is that since a lot of these federal buildings were built so long ago, their design is not suitable to modern, standards for what you have. And in some cases, it'll require a lot of alterations in order to be able to get it to be suitable for the property. So I think there's still some issues in both areas, identifying some of the properties and then actually disposing of them when you can. What I'm concerned about, what we raised this year, is that deferred maintenance is exploding.
Right.
And so.
Why?
Yeah. Well, that's not being funded, and the agencies aren't prioritizing it.
So for GSA, is that money that they're actually getting paid back into the system, is that getting siphoned off into other things?
Yes.
Or if that money wasn't getting siphoned off into other things, would they be able to get caught up or at least maintain status quo?
Yeah, the building fund is being used for purposes other than the building fund. And so I think that's Congress's decision, and they've made that decision. And so I think, if you talk to GSA, they talked about that handicaps their ability to maintain and prepare properties for disposal. So it's something that I think Congress needs to, weigh and make different priority decisions on if you want to prioritize that area.
Okay. I want to ask you one last thing, unless something else comes
Sure.
up, then I'll take my one last thing comment back. And that is about the tax gap. This has been something GAO has looked at for a very long time. Are you seeing on the tax gap issue any trends that you would say, if you would just close this is a third of the tax gap, or this is a significant portion, or is it so unidentifiable where the tax gap is really coming from? That is taxes that are owed that are not actually coming in.
Right.
Going back to Senator Marino's comment, if he had somebody that owed him something in his business, he would drive over and personally pick it up. With the IRS, they may eventually get to it. They might do it. And if they do it, they'll do it with great vigor, or they might not on it. Where are we having a percentage of tax gap that need to be addressed?
Yeah, about 84% of it is underreporting of income. Then you have another percent that's about 10% that is being reported but not just paid, they haven't paid. And then you got about 9%, and these are rough figures that we have. I'll give you the exact one. It's proportionally about this accurate, and about 9% of non-filing at all. And we have a lot of open recommendations here. One is to have more third-party reporting like on real estate transactions, maintenance, they could report who they've made payments to for maintenance that could be compared. Third-party reporting, where you have the biggest gap is where you have people that are sole proprietors or others where they're not, taxes aren't withheld at the pay in payroll. Like most of the people work, your employer withholds your taxes, sends it to the IRS. Where that happens, there's very little non-compliance. It's where that doesn't happen. So having third-party information for IRS to compare is very important. We have a number of recommendations outstanding. Second, I think there needs to be more, IRS needs to be given the authority to set professional standards for paid tax preparers. There's a high fraud rate in the earned income tax credit area, and their improper payments are usually, they're one of the top offenders in this area. And we found, looking at IRS data in the past, that people who prepare their own taxes have a higher accuracy rate than people who use paid tax preparers in some of those areas. So the other thing is to get everything in electronic form. They're still allowing some paper information to be filed, which leads to errors as it gets converted, and so we try to get them to scan the information. And then lastly, I'd say we have a whole set of recommendations on advice to taxpayers to help them understand how to gain compliance over time. And so that's helpful as well as students. But I think this is a huge area that can be used to help improve our fiscal situation if the right application of IRS's information to increase a more sophisticated enforcement of this and proper enforcement, proper balance. These aren't, and so I would encourage the committee to look forward to it. I can tell you, I've been hawking this issue around government for a while, and anytime I talk to people about the tax gap or tax enforcement, particularly in the Congress, there's no update. I mean, there's no appetite for it. People want to reduce taxes. I get that, but we have to fund our government. I mean, and if you're going to have a tax system for fairness to everybody who pays their taxes, we ought to enforce it fairly.
I would tell you that the good folks in Oklahoma that are paying taxes get incredibly frustrated with somebody down the street that they figure out is not paying taxes.
Absolutely.
And so this is not a partisan issue. This is, I'm an American.
Yeah, right.
And if I'm required to be able to pay taxes, to be able to take care of the United States military, to take care of our national defense, to take care of our streets, to take care of things that we've got to do as a nation, I want to make sure the person down the street is also paying theirs.
Yeah, it's a fairness issue, and if it's not dealt with properly, it undermines voluntary compliance.
It is. Gene, I'm going to give you the last word on this, and you can talk about Pittsburgh, you can talk about your family, you can talk about GAO, what do you want to do, but this is wrapping it up for you in your last hearing.
Okay. Well, first, thank you again for the opportunity to be here. I want to say on behalf of the people at the GAO that we take our mission to support the Congress and carrying out its constitutional responsibilities very seriously. We work diligently to give you good recommendations that can be acted upon. I would just encourage the Congress to continue to support the GAO, to provide it with the resources, to provide it with the access to the information, and have our backs when we need to get help, to get the information we need to serve the Congress, and to act on our recommendations. We don't expect 100%. We get about 77%. But there's a lot of open recommendations that if Congress continues to focus on can yield tens of billions, over 100 billion information is just sitting there waiting for Congress to act. So I think I thank you for the relationship that I've had with you and other members of Congress during my entire tenure. I would just hope that that continues well into the future because you need GAO more than ever at this point. I'm sorry my term's up and I have to leave. I'm not doing it voluntarily. Although if my term wasn't up, I'm not sure my wife would insist upon it at this point in time. But it's been a great privilege to work, to lead the GAO people They're, as I mentioned earlier, it's one of the best workforces in the world. They will serve you, but Congress has to embrace it and act on it.
Okay. Gene, thanks. Thanks for the 5+ decades of work to be able to serve the nation. It is much appreciated. There is still work to be done. You successfully left a few things undone, and so we still have work to do on this. But I do appreciate your partnership over the years to try to be able to help the American taxpayer, and for what you and your whole team continue to be able to do. We're very, very, very grateful for that continued nonpartisan work, because we need eyes and ears and ideas to be able to see through this morass of chaos that is the federal bureaucracy, and to try to help good people that want to be able to serve continue to be able to serve in the most effective way possible in all these different agencies. The record for this hearing will remain open until 5 o'clock p.m. Friday, January the 9th, 2026, into next year, for the submission of statements and for questions for the record. This hearing is now adjourned.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.